They built worlds from glass and light, cloned their own bodies in minutes, and stored memories in crystal archives that would never fade. To them, efficiency was beauty, and emotion was noise. So when humans joined the Galactic Council, the Verelians were confused. Humanity was loud, unpredictable, and strangely passionate. They sang while working, cried at movies, and risked their lives for things that made no logical sense. But what truly puzzled the Verelians was how humans reproduced. The Verelians used cloning pods. A being could be created, grown, and educated within hours. No pain, no mess, no childhood. Humans, on the other hand, took years. They carried new life inside their bodies, waited months, endured discomfort, and then raised helpless offspring for decades before they became useful adults. To the Verelians, it was madness. To humans, it was beautiful. When Dr. Elena Ruiz arrived on Verelia Prime, she was prepared for skepticism. She was the first human biologist invited to teach human life development at the Alien Academy of Genetics. The head of the research group, Karen, greeted her with a polite nod. The aliens were tall and luminous, their skin almost silver, their eyes like pools of glowing water. They had no facial expressions, yet somehow Elena could feel curiosity radiating from them. "Dr. Ruiz," Karen said in a calm, musical tone, "we wish to understand your method of reproduction. We have read your texts, but they are inefficient." Elena smiled. "Inefficient, yes, but there's more to it than biology. It's also about emotion, connection." "Emotion?" Karen tilted her head slightly. "You mean the irrational impulses you call love?" Elena laughed softly. "Exactly. Love, care, sacrifice, those are as important as the cells themselves." The alien scientists looked at one another. To them, love was an abstract idea, something artists simulated, not scientists studied. Still, they agreed to run an experiment. Inside the glass dome of the Verelian biolab, they prepared a set of bioincubators. Each one could grow a simulated human embryo using stored DNA patterns and artificial nutrients. The aliens designed the experiment with mechanical precision, temperature, oxygen, energy cycles, all perfect. But Dr. Ruiz insisted on one addition, the human element. She asked them to observe not only the biological growth, but also the emotional process, the feelings a human parent might experience during pregnancy. At first, the Verelian women saw this as a curiosity. They equipped themselves with neural emotion simulators that could mimic human brainwaves. The devices were meant for research only, no real feelings, just patterns of data. The first Verelian to volunteer was Karen herself. Karen stood before the incubator, her silver hands resting on the glass. Inside floated a small glowing cell cluster, only hours old but alive. "This is primitive," she said. "A slow self-replication process. Our cloning vats can grow an adult in 1 hour." Elena nodded. "Yes, but this little thing will grow naturally. It will change, develop, and form its own mind. That's the point. It learns to live." "Learn to live," Karen repeated, as if testing the words. Over the next few weeks, Karen monitored the incubator. The embryo divided, then grew. Each stage fascinated her in a strange way. She found herself staying longer at the lab, watching the tiny heartbeat flicker inside the fluid. Her neural simulator began to register unusual readings, emotional surges that didn't match any known Verelian pattern. When Dr. Ruiz came to check the data, she smiled. "You're feeling something, aren't you?" Karen looked confused. "I am uncertain. When I observe the subject, my energy levels increase. I feel protective." "That's what we call affection," Elena said softly. "It's normal for human parents." Karen frowned. "But this is only an experiment. The subject has no awareness." "Maybe," Elena replied, "but your mind doesn't care about that. Emotion isn't logical. It's instinct." The second month, the project had become the most watched study in the Galactic Academy. Other Verelian researchers joined in, some out of curiosity, some out of disbelief. They couldn't understand why Karen's neural readings showed growing attachment. The Alien Council demanded an explanation. Why is she emotionally linking to a non-sentient cluster? Elena tried to explain. Because humans don't just reproduce. We connect. We imagine futures, tell stories, and give meaning to new life, and even before it's born. One counselor replied coldly, "Stories do not grow life." Elena smiled. Maybe not, but they give it purpose. One day, Karen arrived early to the lab and found herself humming. She didn't know where the sound came from. Humans called it singing. It was something she'd learned from Dr. Ruiz. The sound echoed in the dome, soft and strange. The incubator pulsed faintly in rhythm, as if responding. When Elena entered, she stopped and listened, smiling. "That's beautiful, Karen." Karen looked embarrassed, or at least the alien equivalent. "I do not understand why I am producing sound." "It's what humans do when they feel joy," Elena said. "You're expressing care." Karen stared at the glowing sphere inside the incubator. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a scientist. She felt like something else. Something she couldn't name yet. Weeks passed. The embryo became a recognizable form, a hybrid of human and Verelian DNA. It had small hands, a faintly glowing chest, and a heartbeat that filled the silent lab with rhythm. Other aliens visited to observe. They recorded data, analyzed readings, and left confused. But Karen stayed. Once, while watching the heartbeat, she spoke quietly to Elena. "We have created many beings, but this one, it feels different." Elena nodded. "Because this one isn't just made, it's cared for." Karen touched the glass again. "Is this what it means to create life the human way?" "Yes," Elena said softly. "To create life, not just copy it." Later that night, Karen walked alone under the bioluminescent sky of Verelia Prime. For the first time, she wondered about herself. She had been cloned from the Council's memory banks like everyone else. She had never had a mother or a childhood. She had never been held, never been loved. Now she understood what those words might mean. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "If this feeling is irrational, then maybe logic is not enough." By the time the embryo reached its final stage of development, something extraordinary had happened. The neural emotion simulators were no longer recording artificial impulses. They were recording real emotions. Karen had somehow begun to generate genuine affection, independent of programming. When the scientists presented their findings to the council, the room was silent. One elder said, "You claim an emotion is formed from nothing?" Elena shook her head. "Not from nothing. From care." Karen stood beside her and added quietly, "We wanted to understand how humans reproduce, but now, I think we are learning how they live." That night, as the artificial moonlight glowed across the laboratory, Karen watched the tiny being resting in its pod. She realized she no longer saw it as data, or experiment, or property. She saw it as hers. And for the first time in Verelian history, an alien heart, once cold and calculated, began to feel the impossible warmth of humanity. Karen had stopped calling the hybrid being Subject A1. Now she called it Luma, a human word Dr. Elena Ruiz had taught her. It meant light. Luma was not yet alive in the human sense. She still floated inside the bioincubator, her body small and translucent, her heart a soft glow in the dark blue fluid. But to Karen, Luma was already something more than an experiment. Every morning, Karen visited the lab before anyone else. She stood by the glass, hands folded, and watched tiny bubbles rise around the glowing shape. She would whisper softly, not data reports, not calculations, but words she didn't understand. Sometimes she hummed like she had seen humans do when comforting a child. When Dr. Ruiz walked in, she found Karen talking to the incubator. "Good morning," Elena said, smiling gently. "She can't hear you yet, you know." Karen turned, her silver eyes bright. "I am aware. Still, the act feels necessary." "Necessary?" Elena asked. "Yes," Karen said after a pause. "It feels as though she listens, not with ears, but with presence. My thoughts feel lighter after I speak. Elena nodded. That's how human parents feel too. We talk to our babies before they're born. It's not for them, it's for us. It's connection. Karen looked thoughtful. Connection, she repeated quietly. The other Verelian researchers began to notice the change. Karen's emotional readings had become unstable by their standards. Her logic centers dimmed while her empathy levels, a trait considered weak among her species, grew rapidly. The council was concerned. They summoned her to a meeting in the Crystal Hall, a vast chamber glowing with holographic data streams. Karen stood before the elders as they reviewed her report. Your neural patterns are deviating from standard Verelian form, said Elder Thal, his voice calm but cold. You are showing signs of human contamination. Karen bowed slightly. I am evolving, not contaminated. I am learning what humans call emotional intelligence. Another elder hissed softly, their tone like static. Emotion leads to chaos. You risk corrupting the experiment. Karen met their glowing eyes. Perhaps the corruption is what makes it work. The elders exchanged silent data signals, debating privately in milliseconds. Finally, they said, You may continue, but your human companion must supervise all activities. We will not allow emotional instability to spread. Karen accepted, though she could feel a quiet resistance rising inside her, a human-like defiance that even she didn't fully understand. Back at the lab, Elena noticed her friend's silence. What happened? She asked. The council fears my emotions, Karen said softly. They think I am unstable. Elena smiled sadly. Welcome to being human. Karen tilted her head. It is not pleasant. No, Elena said, but it makes you real. Days passed and something remarkable began to happen. When Karen approached the incubator, the readings inside changed. Luma's heart rate increased slightly. Her neural activity brightened. The other scientists were baffled. It's responding to her voice, one said. That's impossible, said another. But Elena only smiled. No, that's connection. They decided to test it. Karen stayed away from the incubator for 2 full cycles. During that time, Luma's growth slowed and her energy signals weakened. When Karen returned, speaking softly through the glass, the readings spiked again. The aliens stared at the data in disbelief. This defies every biological principle, one murmured. No, Elena said again. It proves one. She looked at Karen. You're showing her what love feels like, and she's responding. Karen's voice trembled slightly. Then, emotion is a variable, not a flaw, Elena smiled. Exactly. The lab changed after that. The other Verelians who once watched from a distance now began to imitate Karen. Some stood near the incubators, speaking softly or humming tunes. They said it helped them focus, but secretly, they felt the same warmth. Karen described a strange comfort that logic couldn't explain. The once silent lab now filled with faint voices and soft songs. Elena watched this transformation with quiet pride. They're starting to act human, she whispered to herself. Even the machines seemed to react differently. The incubators glowed warmer. The air felt alive with invisible energy. For the first time in Verelian history, emotion entered science and improved it. One evening, Karen found Elena sitting by the observation window, looking out at the stars. Do you ever miss your world? Karen asked. Every day, Elena said softly. But I think I was meant to come here. To show your people something they lost? Lost? Karen asked. Elena nodded. You said once that you clone your bodies and store memories. But do you remember feelings? Do you remember what it's like to hold someone's hand and not know why it feels right? Karen thought for a long time. No, she said finally. We remember facts, not warmth. Elena smiled sadly. Then maybe that's what you're finding now. Karen turned to look at Luma's pod. The little being floated peacefully, her body now forming fingers, a face, faint strands of light that looked like hair. I think, Karen whispered, I am beginning to understand why humans take so long to create life. It gives them time to love it. Word of Karen's strange emotions spread beyond the research facility. Verelians from other colonies came to see for themselves, some out of fear, others out of curiosity. One young researcher, Tharis, confronted Karen in the lab. You are embarrassing our kind, he said coldly. You sing to a cell cluster. You disobey logic, Karen looked at him calmly. Perhaps logic is not everything, Tharis glared. You sound like the human. I hope so, Karen said quietly. Because she is teaching me how to feel alive. That night, Karen couldn't sleep. She walked through the dark corridors of the lab, past the quiet incubators and glowing data screens. She stopped before Luma's pod and placed her hand on the glass. Inside, the tiny hybrid stirred, as if sensing her presence. Karen whispered, They do not understand you. But I do. You are not just creation. You are meaning. Her neural device flickered with bright, erratic signals, not malfunction, but something new, genuine emotion. And then something even stranger happened. The incubator lights pulsed in sync with Karen's heartbeat. The machine recognized her emotional signal and adapted to it. Luma's body responded with gentle movement, her heartbeat syncing perfectly with Karen's rhythm. Elena entered and froze. Karen! Do you see this? Karen nodded, tears shimmering in her silver eyes. She is alive, with me. The following morning, the council sent inspectors. They demanded to shut down the experiment. This hybrid poses risk, Elder Thal declared. It responds to emotion. Uncontrolled variables are dangerous. Karen stood firm. Without emotion, it will die. That is what we have learned. The council was silent. Then one elder said coldly, If emotion is required, then you have created a weakness. Elena stepped forward. No, she said. They've created strength. A kind of strength your species has forgotten. But the council was unmoved. Continue only under strict monitoring. If instability increases, the hybrid will be terminated. The word terminated echoed like thunder in Karen's mind. For the first time in her life, fear filled her. A deep human fear of loss. That evening, Karen stood before the incubator once more. She spoke softly. They do not see your light, little one, but I do. And I will protect it. Elena watched her from across the room, heart heavy yet proud. She saw in Karen something remarkable. The birth of compassion in a species that had forgotten it. When Karen looked up, her eyes glowed softly with both alien light and human emotion. Elena, she said quietly, perhaps this is what it means to be human. To love something you might lose. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Yes, Karen, that's exactly what it means. From that night on, Karen stayed beside Luma's incubator every hour. She no longer felt like a scientist or even an alien. She felt like a mother. The experiment was no longer about biology. It had become something much greater, a test of the heart. And deep inside the glowing pod, the hybrid child's heartbeat grew stronger, bright, rhythmic, and full of something the Verelians had never known before. Hope. The final stage of the experiment had begun. Inside the glowing pod, Luma floated quietly, her tiny body complete and perfect, a harmony of human and Verelian life. Her heart pulsed in steady rhythm, bright as a small star. For Karen, every beat felt like a miracle. For the Verelian Council, it was a threat. They had watched the data reports in silence. The hybrid's connection to Karen was growing stronger. It was not mechanical or digital, it was emotional. And that made it dangerous in their eyes. The council feared what they did not understand. A being guided by emotion could not be controlled. Dr. Elena Ruiz entered the lab that morning and found Karen sitting beside the pod, eyes closed, her hand resting gently on the glass. You haven't slept, Elena said softly. Karen shook her head. I cannot. Every time I close my eyes, I feel her heartbeat in my mind. It is as if she is calling to me. Elena smiled sadly. That's what mothers feel too. A bond that never stops. Mothers, Karen whispered. I like that word. She looked up, her silver eyes glowing faintly with soft blue light. Elena, if the council decides to end the experiment, they will end her too. Elena nodded. I know, but we'll find a way. Karen turned to her, voice trembling. You have given me something I never had. Hope. I cannot let them take it away. 2 days later, the council arrived at the facility. The great crystal doors opened and 6 elders entered, surrounded by guards. Their glowing robes shimmered as they moved, cold and perfect. Subject A1 has exceeded authorized parameters, Elder Thal announced. The hybrid now displays emotional synchronization. This threatens Verelian stability. Karen stood in front of the pod protectively. She threatens nothing. She only lives. Life without control is chaos, Thal said sternly. You were warned, Karen. Elena stepped forward. You're making a mistake. This experiment proves something extraordinary. Emotion doesn't weaken life and it strengthens it. But the elders ignored her. One of them pressed a control crystal, and the incubator's energy field began to dim. Luma's heartbeat faltered. Karen's voice broke. "Stop, you're killing her." "She is not alive," the elder replied coldly. Karen's body trembled. "Then why can I feel her fear?" For a moment, silence filled the room. The monitors showed faint energy waves, signals coming from Luma's tiny brain responding to Karen's voice. It was proof. Elena gasped. "She's aware. She recognizes Karen." The council hesitated, but fear of the unknown was stronger than curiosity. Elder Thal raised his hand. "Terminate the connection." Before the guards could move, Karen stepped between them and the pod. Her voice was calm but firm. "You will not harm her." Something changed in that moment. Karen's neural device glowed brightly, brighter than it ever had before. The entire lab shimmered with energy as her emotions surged. The machines began to respond. Lights flickered, data streams pulsed, and the pod's energy stabilized again. The guards stumbled backward. Shielding their eyes, Elena whispered, amazed. "She's merging with the system." Karen's voice echoed steady and filled with warmth. "Luma and I are connected. She feels my heart. She learns through my care. This is not chaos. This is life." The elders tried to override the controls, but every command failed. The systems refused to obey them, and as if the lab itself had chosen sides. Karen turned to the council. "For ages we believed perfection meant control. But perfection without feeling is emptiness. Humans are not perfect, but they are alive. Truly alive." Elena stepped beside her. "Maybe it's time you learn from us, not just study us." The energy in the room grew warmer, softer. Luma's heartbeat steadied, then strengthened. A faint sound, like a child's first breath, filled the air. Karen gasped. "She's awakening." Elena ran to the monitor. "Her brain activity is off the charts. She's responding to you." Inside the pod, Luma's small eyes opened, glowing with both human brown and Verelian silver light. She reached toward the glass, tiny fingers pressing gently against it. Karen placed her hand on the other side. For the first time in Verelian history, a mother and child looked at each other. Not through code or memory, but through love. The elders stood frozen. Their data screens filled with unreadable values, emotions, empathy, connection. None of it fit into their equations. Elder Thal finally spoke, voice shaking. "What have we done?" Elena turned to him. "You've seen the future. A future that's not just built but born." Karen smiled faintly. "And it began with one feeling we were told to forget." "Love?" Thal asked. "Yes," Karen said softly. "Love." News of the event spread across Verelia Prime within hours. Scientists, citizens, and thinkers gathered to witness what many called the awakening. Some were afraid. Others were moved to tears, even those who didn't know how to cry. The council could no longer hide the truth. They announced a new era of research, not into cloning or control, but into connection. Karen and Elena were asked to lead it. Weeks later, Luma was transferred into a natural growth chamber, free from machines. She was small but healthy, her energy bright and stable. Karen visited her every day. The once cold lab was now filled with color, music playing softly, laughter echoing in the halls. Even the scientists smiled now. Elena often joked, "Look what you've done, Karen." "You've made aliens sing lullabies," Karen smiled. "Perhaps humanity is contagious." One evening, as stars shimmered through the dome, Karen and Elena sat beside Luma's chamber. "She will grow differently," Elena said. "Part human, part Verelian. Maybe she'll teach both our species what we forgot." Karen nodded slowly. "She already has. Before her I only existed. Now I live." Elena looked at her with quiet pride. "You sound human now?" Karen smiled faintly. "No, I sound alive." They sat in silence, watching the child's soft glow. Months passed. The Verelians began to change. They started forming families, not from data archives, but through shared emotion. They raised young clones as individuals, not copies. They painted, sang, and even dreamed. Their once silent cities began to hum with life and laughter. And among them, the story of Karen and Luma became legend, the mother of light who taught her people to feel again. Years later, As Luma grew into a bright young being with both human warmth and alien wisdom, she often asked Karen, "Mother, why did you fight for me?" Karen would smile and reply, "Because when I saw you, I felt something no science could explain." "And what was it?" Luma would ask. Karen would place her hand over Luma's glowing chest and whisper, "The same thing that gives you this, a heartbeat." Luma would laugh softly, her eyes shining. "That's what humans call love, isn't it?" "Yes," Karen said, "and it's the most powerful force in the universe." Dr. Elena Ruiz eventually returned to Earth, but she was not the same woman who had arrived years before. She carried stories of a species that had learned humanity not through conquest or trade, but through compassion. Before she left, Karen gave her a small crystal sphere that glowed faintly. "A reminder," she said, "that even logic can be taught to feel." Elena smiled and hugged her friend, a gesture once alien, now familiar. "Thank you, Karen. You proved that being human isn't about origin. It's about heart." When the human ship departed, Karen and Luma watched from the observatory tower. The stars stretched across the sky like threads of light, each one carrying a memory of the journey they had shared. Karen looked at her daughter and said softly, "You are proof that two worlds can become one." Luma smiled, her voice gentle. "Then let's teach them both how to live." And so, the story of a curious alien scientist and a brave human teacher became a legend across the stars. The Verelians, once beings of pure logic, now carried songs in their hearts. They still built cities of glass and light, but now, in those cities, children laughed, families gathered, and the sound of life filled the air. It all began with one simple question: what does it mean to be human? The answer, they discovered, was not in DNA or machines, but in the quiet, powerful truth of a heartbeat shared between two souls.